The following are examples of A-level work at Pocklington School for the year 2000. In this project, the student looked at the change in environment. She was concerned that artists in the past had painted a sort of romantic view of the environment, although the environment wasn't damaged in any way then, and she felt that she had a statement to make, which was to show the environment today. Here is an example of her book where she starts looking at past people's work. She starts to destroy the imagery. All students on the course had a book equivalent to this. Here she looks at a past master's work, people like Turner and Constable, and she starts destroying their images with fire and oil. Here's a Van Gogh that's had the oil poured all over it. The next thing she does, she starts to take images and put them on the computer and starts to change them using various techniques. The final piece, she took examples of things found in the environment, from the countryside to the town and the seaside. She painted these white and used them as a backdrop to project a video projector onto them. The video projector showed images from geography films, but these were sliced up.
Same time you take orders of heat and that. It released a volcanic blow
that struck Alaska. They usually occur by
LA grew different. Our people
headlines all over the world. These oil spill made headlines.
called it the San Francisco Wall. The two-car garage.
sea
Death toll could be 10 minutes, but they were fighting a losing
its way down rivers and valleys.
battle. It's hard to clean off oil using only
When
The entire side of Mount of the scarrings.
your own front yard and backyard recorded the
It's estimated.
In the next project, the student looked at the interior of a derelict house. This was done by photographing the imagery, drawing the imagery, doing etchings of the imagery, monoprints of the imagery, and basically getting a collection of work together. One of the things that she noticed was that the light was important, so she tried here to do some sort of projections through tracing paper. They didn't work, but it was a good experiment. She realised that the light was as important as the broken down interior. The object that she was moving towards was an object which would contain small theatre type sets of these rooms with light projecting through them. Here we see a sheet which shows etchings and monoprints. The other thing she did was to make small maquettes of various parts of little rooms, basically shoebox type size, looking at the textures and the broken down bits of imagery, using wallpaper, paint, destroying the surfaces, etc. Another thing she did was to actually take the imageries and put them back on the computer, and then use that to distort the colour even further. So these are computer type prints. Her final piece was a collection of rooms in a long box. In the light she could see them, see all the rooms, and here are a series of the rooms on top of each other and at the side of each other. So she's made a collection of all the images from the photographs and the drawings. But the thing that she wanted to do was to get the light to project through them, so a series of lights at the back were put in, and where the cracks in the walls or the cracks in the doors, she emphasised these. The video doesn't pick it up very well, but it was most effective. This project could even nearly fall into the realm of being a theatre set project as well. It was very, very effective. It's unfortunate the video doesn't really do it true justice, but it's well worth pursuing in future. Another expansion of this would be to have sound at the same time, a sort of sound which would go through an old house and creaking stairs, etc. That would be another way of expanding this project. A visit to Hull Fair at night started this project. The artist she looked at was Kandinsky, and started to work on trying to get the sort of light and the fluorescence of the light, as she did in many ways, but ended up coming down to using things like UV paint. She started to try and incorporate movement in her drawings, and wanted to make a sculpture which had movement and also had the light. She used photographs and smearing the photographs to try and find ways of getting movement. Wire was used in an effort to try and get the linear quality of the streaks of light. The book was very thorough, and then this developed into a series of oil pastel paintings which tried to describe the movement of light. These came out of a series of photographs which were done on time-lapse, and were very informative as to how the light went. Again, here's another project which could be expanded more with sound as well as light. The student did actually use a video as well to actually capture some of this effect, which was very useful as well. The oil pastels were very good, but didn't show the sort of neon quality, so she made this sculpture here, which is a mirror behind. In the dark, it all glowed under UV light. It was the most with the sound of Hull Fair in the background. The most effective and dramatic piece of work. In this project, the student looked at the work of Colin Calvin and started to look at how you can project imagery over the top of other imagery. This she did by taking a series of small still lifes and doing paintings over the top, mostly things which were relevant. I.e., if it was a comb, it would have someone's face over it. If it was kitchen equipment, it would have a sort of still life. She chose at one point to take a Cézanne still life and put it over the top of a still life of something similar. Here it is, a breakfast cereal and a jar and a spoon, etc. She took the Lucian Freud painting as at the start of the domestic scene, as if they were looking at a TV, and then got the objects, a chair and a TV, and then started to paint the picture over the top of the images. This was done by using a slide projector to push the image over. In the project Life, Death, Rot and Decay, the student looked at rotting vegetables and fruit. This she did a series of photographs as they gradually rotted. Here, lettuce rots and starts to go mouldy. The process has taken literally months, and this obviously doesn't show all the work that went on. She then took a series of monoprints and etchings and looked at the way the sort of imagery was sort of rotting before her eyes, and that was the interest in the change of colour and the change of shape as these things died. This basically is a time project. She started to look at the leaves and paint them, and at the beginning she looked at the tomatoes while they were fresh, and then she started to look at things which rotted, as in the plums on the next drawing. She started to get this mould and this white over them. It was interesting to see that one of the tomatoes actually lasted 6 months before rotting. The final piece was the rotten things themselves, which were put in sealed boxes so they wouldn't smell. Here we can see some bean sprouts, which are very much like a Jackson Pollock, and again it could be an idea for another project where you do a Jackson Pollock out of bean sprouts. Here's the lettuce leaves, which look like the wings of insects, and here are the tomatoes, which eventually went mouldy, went some incredible colours, then produced this sort of black mould. Another project she went into, which became her exam piece, was a rotten piece of bread which she allowed to rot to produce this incredibly beautiful looking object. She started to do ink and bleach paintings of this, looking closely at the surface and the change in colour as it rotted. These became like landscapes, and this made her actually want to do even larger pictures. The larger pictures went further away from the original and started to become something in themselves. This is a large one, colour slightly exaggerated by the camera, but quite glowing. And here's another picture. The final idea was actually to make paintings from food found in the house: rice, tomato sauce, mustard, peas, potatoes. And as she did these were quite large, she started to photograph them, and they would rot. These actually rotted very, very quickly, and became beautiful at one point, but smelly as well. These are large photocopies of them, because the things did not exist after that. The beautiful colours of the greens which you get from mould. I think it's more advisable to do these in sealed conditions. Here's a wonderful one, the beautiful colours from the start, then it eventually went to that, which is incredible really. The next one shows potatoes and peas, which have a strange face about them, and then they rot to become this. Another one, which is another project, shows great potential for the future. In the project Domestic Disturbance, the student looked at the work of Tim Hunkin. His drawings showed a crazy world where ordinary objects moved without the aid of human beings. Here, a record player is used to drive a toothbrush. The next one she looked at was the idea of polishing a pair of shoes. Another record player was used, and the piston was attached to her hand to polish the shoes. In another project called Gravitate to Levitate, she attached a hairdryer to a record player, and this blew leaves in a container. The next project that she got involved with was one on movement, looking at clothes on a washing line, and the artists like Severini and Francis Bacon. The thing that was looked at first was the patterns made by the flowing materials. These were drawn and then coloured. The next stage was to use bits of paper to represent the flowing pieces of cloth, a bit like vorticism. The final project was a made piece in a cube which came on and blew like leaves in the wind when people stood by it. In Skin Deep, the student looked at the way human beings wear animal skins. Her final piece was a sculpture made from latex rubber which had all the textures of many different animals on them. Some of her initial drawings were of textures of animal prints, and her sheets were very, very detailed. She looked at the work of Du and took photographs of animals in the zoo. These were used to put on the female frame. She'd also looked at the idea of anorexia in an earlier project, and this was brought back as something to do with how we can conceive of the human form. In another project she looked at the way the human form can be compared with animals hanging in a butcher's. The skins and especially the muscles were looked at. These were painted in bright colours, very much like an anatomical drawing. Final project here was a plaster cast of parts of the body pressed into plaster and painted in on the interior of the muscles. This was a very effective piece and glowed. Again, the video doesn't do it justice. The idea for the plaster came from another project called Nature, where the student had pressed bones, shells, skulls, etc. into clay and then took plaster casts. Then from the plaster cast she made latex moulds, but she decided that she also wanted a positive and negative shape. So here we see on the wall a final piece. The skull was pressed into the clay, then pressed into the plaster, and the rubber left on as well. So the interesting thing about this was a positive and negative forms. In the meat project, the student looked at the structure of meat and the colour of meat. The pictures became large paintings very similar to Hockney's landscapes. Here we see some lamb hanging in a butcher's window. She made one of them into a large painting made up of different sections. Then each section was taken again and broken down, and here we see that she actually forms Mandelbrots, which are repeating patterns. She didn't really understand what these were, but she'd seen this in the surface. Her books were extremely thorough. She looked at many of these sort of sensational type artists. Damien Hirst, especially when it came to meat. So she also looked at different forms of the female body. The student was actually having trouble with anorexia at one point, so it was quite appropriate and became a very good therapy for her. She scaled up and scaled down to get these images, and some images came off a video. And there's Giacometti along with Du. In this video project, the student set out to get a different view of the world. Influenced by people like McQueen and Pippin, she set out to put her video camera in places which you wouldn't expect, or heights you wouldn't expect to see the world. She put them on trolleys in canteens and saw pictures of pipes and the different worlds from underneath the tables, and then did drawings and etchings from these. She also put them in shopping trolleys in the supermarket, on a lawnmower, and also on a hoover. The final thing was a set of videos all going at the same time. They all looked as though they were remotely controlled. In the project Positive and Negative, the student first of all looked at people like Rachel Whiteread. She began to turn things inside out: teddy bear, a doll, a chest of drawers, shoes, a television, a radio, a football, were all turned inside out. This project led on into another project where she was concerned with the insides and outsides of shoes and gloves. Here it's called Positive and Negative. Casts were taken inside gloves and these were hung up. She also took the shape of the inside of a pair of clasped hands, and these make these type of alien type shapes which are shown on the back wall. The shoes were put positive and negative next to each other. And here are the hands. She selected people to clasp their hands together and poured plaster into them. Very alien type heads. In distorted view, she took the idea of a chair, photographed it in a Hockney style, then in a cubist way reassembled it. This distorted the image of the chair. She painted it and then finally made a construction from it. Here are some of the constructions on the left hand side, and this is the final piece. In this project, the student looked at the effects of water going down drains, water in washing machines, water going down toilets, water at the seaside, the scum, the foam. She then put a load of tea bags into a container and started to make tea bag paintings. These she let cascade down the wall, also putting little creases in the paper to make it have a better effect. The final thing looked like a set of railway lines, as these were put together in a sort of symmetrical type way. Here's a close-up of two surfaces together.